0.5 stars. This was literally one of my least favorite reads of the entire year. I would not recommend this to my worst enemy. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who don't know, my name is Faith and thank you so much for watching. I don't know how I did it, but I read 22 books in the month of December. If you watched my November reading wrap up, you know that I was extremely worried for my physical TBR this month. I officially counted my physical TBR last April and it was about 66 books, I think. And I've been trying really hard to get that as low as possible, and then Black Friday came and I got a little carried away. Black Friday is in November, however, the Barnes & Noble Black Friday sale did extend to December 1st, and that is when I went to Barnes & Noble. And then I also had an online order from Black Friday that didn't arrive till December. So in December, I added 15 books to my physical TBR. So while I ended the month of November with 45 books on my TBR, all those books from Black Friday did push it back up to about 60. And throughout the month, I was like, wow, I am almost right where I started 8 months ago. My original reading goal for the year was 43 books. However, I met that months ago, so I decided to double it and go to 86. And I ended November with 8 books read, so I needed to read at least 8 in December to hit that goal. And like I said, I read 22 books, so I did hit that goal. And when I hit it, I was like, you know what? I really need to get my physical TBR down. So let's try and get my physical TBR down to 50. And then I hit that goal and I was like, you know what? I'm really close to reading 100 books this year, so I need to push a little harder to get that goal. And I did. So not only did I read 22 books this month, which is the most I've ever read, I think, I also read 100 books this year, which is also probably the most I've ever read, and I got my physical TBR down below 50. With all that out of the way, let's start discussing my December reading wrap up, and at the end of this video, I will discuss my goals for next year. As always, this video will contain spoilers, and I will put timestamps of when I talk about each book in the description below. And because I read 22 books and I don't want this video to be insanely long, I might keep some of these reviews fairly short. All that being said, let's get into it. First, I read Blackheart by Pixie Rella, and I gave this one 3.75 stars. There were a few times where the characters were acting out of character, and there also just weren't enough likable characters in this book. And I don't mean that they're all insufferable, however, nobody was understanding of the FMC's past trauma at all. She has essentially been locked in a cage with other people with dark powers, and nobody is really sympathetic about that. And I don't mean she was locked in there for a day or two. She was in there for years and years and years, and that entire time she was treated very poorly. One character specifically was incredibly rude to her the entire time, and then for some reason at the end the FMC considers her a friend, even though nothing she has done has been friendly in any way. It's not like she started rude and then gradually became nice. No, she was rude and she was consistently rude the entire time. There was no character growth for her. So I just found it really weird how with no behavioral changes, the FMC like accepted her into her life and was like, ah, we're friends now. No. While the characters weren't my favorite, overall I did really enjoy the plot, which is why I ended up giving it 3.75 stars. I do think I'll be continuing the series, and I definitely think it's worth a try. Also, I don't think I said it, but I did arc read that book, and it is available now. And then I read Two Can Play by Hazelwood, and I ended up giving this one 4 stars. I liked this one, and I did think it was really cute, but I do just wish we got it as a full-length novel because I really liked the concept for it. It's currently only available as an audiobook, however, I believe in a month or two it's going to be released as a physical book. I wasn't the biggest fan of the narrators for this one, so if you haven't read it yet, I probably would wait until it's a physical book. The audiobook is only like 4 or 4.5 hours, so it is pretty short. I do feel like the beginning was dragged out a little bit too long and that the ending was kind of rushed. So it did kind of seem like they got into their relationship really fast. That being said, going in, I did know that it was fairly short, so I went in knowing, hey, their relationship might be a little rushed in this book. Again, I gave it 4 stars. Overall, I did like it and I would recommend it. And then we have The Blood Plagues by Anavrin, and I was also an arc reader for this one. She did only give us arc readers the first 10 chapters, and it is not out yet, so I'm not going to say much about this one. And because it was only the first 10 chapters, I don't want to give it a star rating yet. The writing is beautiful, and I think the characters are very well written, and they're also really likable. Like I said, I don't want to give it a star rating just because I haven't read the whole thing, but don't be surprised when I do read the whole thing and I come back and tell you it's 5 stars. I think she's wanting to release it around March, so definitely keep your eye out for this one. And then I got the arc of Ski You Tomorrow by McGivern, and I gave it 5 stars. I loved this book so much. It was so cute. I think the pacing of their relationship was really good, and it felt really natural. I feel like sometimes you'll read a book and be like, these characters don't make any sense together. However, that is not the case with this book at all. Aurora and Xander are so cute, and they are so cute together. I read this book in one sitting. It was that good. Again, I gave it 5 stars, and I did receive the arc, but it is now available, and I highly recommend it. And then I finally read First by Hazelwood, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. Honestly, at first, I was really confused, and I was really worried that I wasn't gonna like it, but I ended up really enjoying it. Again, this is just another one where I really like the concept, and I would have loved to see it as a full-length novel. For some reason, I've seen a lot of people say that this was her smuttiest book. That is not true at all. There's literally 2 smut scenes in the entire book and they're both fairly short, and one of them, they don't even like go all the way. Like I said, I gave it 4 stars and I ended up really enjoying it, so I definitely recommend it, and now I think I will be reading the rest of the After the End romance collection. And then I read Sinbin by Chelsea Curto and I loved it so much. I love the DC stars. I gave this book 5 stars. I was lucky enough to receive the ARC for this book, and the second I saw that email, I literally dropped everything and sat down and started reading it. Chelsea Curto can genuinely do no wrong in my eyes, especially when it comes to DC stars. I loved this book so much. I literally can't think of a single negative thing about this book. If you read Hat Trick and you haven't read Sinbin yet, be sure to bring your tissues because she does put us through that emotional turmoil again. This book was so cute, and I am not a fan of age gap romances at all, so for her to make me love one this much is a feat in itself. I think this is the first single parent romance that I read where the child is over the age of like 10, and I actually really liked that. I literally loved every single thing about this book, and as always, her characters are so well written. They are so multi-layered, and they just feel like real people making real decisions. There's so many teasers for Grant's book in this book, and I'm so excited for it. It also ends on a slight cliffhanger, so if you don't like that, I maybe would not read the epilogue just yet. Again, I absolutely loved it. I gave it 5 stars, and if you haven't read the DC Star series yet, you need to. And then I received yet another ARC for The Probability of Us by Elizabeth-Jade Taylor. This was a debut novel, and it is genuinely one of the best written romance books I have ever read. The writing was absolutely beautiful. The characters were incredibly well written. This is another book where they felt like real people making real decisions. I loved how consistent the characters were throughout the entire story. Jelani is super stubborn, and she had her reasons to be, and she never just dropped that personality trait in order for the plot to move quicker or anything. And I feel like that's something that tends to happen, so I'm just really glad that that didn't happen in this book. Again, it was really good, and I gave it 5 stars, and I definitely would recommend it. And then I read Apprentice to the Villain, and I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. I really liked this book. However, there definitely were some times that did drag a little bit. I'm not the biggest fan of Becky. I don't hate her, but I definitely don't like her enough to read chapters from her point of view, so I didn't really like that addition in this book. However, she didn't get that many chapters, and the ones she did get were fairly short, so it wasn't that bad. I thought this was a good progression to the overall story after the first book, so like I said, I gave it 4.5 stars, and if you liked Assistant to the Villain, I definitely would continue the series. And then of course I had to follow that up with Accomplice to the Villain, which I ended up giving 4 stars. I really enjoyed the plot in this book, however, there were way too many POV changes. And they were also timed terribly. Anytime something really exciting was happening and we were going like this, for some reason there would be a chapter with a POV change and we'd immediately go like that. Like we're building excitement, we're building it, and then boom, boring chapter. I really didn't like that, and at first I tried to overlook it. However, it kept happening and it kept happening and it kept happening, and it really started to get annoying towards the last half. So while I liked everything else about this book, that just kind of pissed me off if I'm being honest, so I did end up giving this one 4 stars. That being said, I've seen other people have no problem with that, so if you like the first 2 books in the series, I would still read this book. And then I read my book club's pick of the month, and that was Holiday Ever After by Hannah Grace, and I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. It was very slow. I feel like the entire book was kind of building up to this confrontation that Clara would have with her dad, and then we literally never got that. Like at the end, her dad says something and that makes her decide, wow, yeah, I'm quitting this company, but we never get a confrontation between the 2 of them. And honestly, that was just really disappointing because a confrontation was built up the entire book and then we just didn't get one. But I did like most of the characters, and I thought Clara and Jack were cute together. Again, I gave it 3.5 stars, and I feel like it is literally the book version of a Hallmark movie. So if you don't like Hallmark movies, I don't think you would like it, but if you do like Hallmark movies, I think you might enjoy it. And just in time for the movie, I read The Housemaid by Freida McFadden. And speaking of the movie, a couple weeks ago, I added a video to my series where I compare books to their film or TV show adaptation, and I did The Housemaid. So if you're looking of a comparison of the book and movie, you should check that out. I absolutely love this book. I gave it 5 stars. Honestly, I was not expecting to like it nearly as much as I did. This book is very simple, very straightforward, and it gets into the plot very quickly. If you are somebody who thinks thrillers can be kind of slow or boring, I definitely think you should give this one a try because it is not like that at all. I can't lie, at first I did think the characters were insufferable, but then as the book goes on and you learn the truth of things, I completely flipped my mindset on that. The plot twist is slightly predictable, but I don't really care. I still think it was really freaking good. So again, 5 stars. I highly recommend it, and I also highly recommend you watch the movie. And then I read The Mating Game by Lana Ferguson, and I gave it 4 stars. Overall, I think it was engaging. However, the middle did drag just a bit. The characters were super cute together, and I do think it was a good continuation of the series. That being said, if there's not a third book about Ada, her story in this book made no sense. At the beginning, we're clued into her having kind of a bad past, it seems, but we're not told exactly what that is for a while. And then we do find out, and then the next time we hear about her, she has a mate, which made no sense if we don't get a third book explaining all of that. But that was such a minuscule part of the book that I can kind of overlook that. If you've never read shifter romances before but you want to get into them, I do think this one and The Fake Mate are a good place to start. It takes place in the real world with some people being alphas, betas, and omegas, so it is super simple and easy to understand. Overall, I really enjoyed it. Like I said, I gave it 4 stars and I definitely would recommend it. And then I read Dear Santa by Kristen Granata and I gave it 1.5 stars. I didn't like it at all. The writing was fine, it wasn't bad, but it definitely did not save the story. The concept truly just does not work as a novella at all. Jake is at a bar and he overhears Christina talking about how she's getting a male escort, and then he steps in and pretends to be that escort. And I don't get why she needed an escort because there was nothing sexual about it. She just needed somebody to pretend to be her fake boyfriend to take to Christmas with her family. Literally within a couple hours of them meeting, Jake is confessing his dark past with mental health issues to Christina, and it just progressed so fast, it made no sense. And this was not a situation where it's like, oh, it's easier to open up to strangers. It was like, something is special about this girl and I feel like I can tell her everything. And again, after a few hours, very unrealistic. And then we're introduced to her family and it's like 10 people and it was so confusing keeping track of who was who. And it's not like you could forget about them because they were present the rest of the book. They literally start as strangers and then in the span of a few days, they're already saying they love each other, and there's also a third act breakup. So all of that in a really short novella just was too unrealistic for me. Again, I gave it 1.5 stars. I would not recommend this book. And then I read Bound by Hazelwood and I ended up giving it 4 stars. I honestly wasn't sure how I'd feel about this book, but I ended up really liking it. This one is almost twice the length as Two Can Play. However, like with Two Can Play, I think the beginning was dragged on a bit too long, so the relationship did seem just a little bit rushed. But honestly, I don't think it was that bad at all. This one is only available as an audiobook right now, and as of right now, I don't think there's any plans to make it a physical book. However, I really hope that they do, because I would love to give this book a second chance as a physical book. I gave it 4 stars, so it doesn't really need a second chance. However, I didn't like the male narrator at all. Truthfully, the male narrator is a big reason I gave it 4 stars and didn't get it any higher, because I kind of found his parts harder to pay attention to just because I didn't like him. So I do think I would enjoy it more and rate it higher if I was able to physically read the book. But he didn't have that many parts, and overall, I did really enjoy it. So again, 4 stars, and I would recommend this book. And then I read Thrown for Loot by Sarina Bowen, and I didn't like it at all. I gave it 0.5 stars. I could sit here for 10 minutes and tell you everything I hate about this book, but I'm gonna try to keep it as short as I can. This book was so boring. It's a 370-page book. Literally nothing happens in the first 300 pages. You may think that this is a hockey romance based on the fact that it says hockey up here and it also says hockey romance down here, and they're playing hockey. Do not be fooled. This book is about figure skating. There are pages and pages and pages of her walking them through figure skating drills step by step and then explaining step by step how that helps with their skating. Don't get me wrong, I like figure skating, but if I'm picking up a hockey romance, the main sport that's talked about should be hockey. And first and foremost, it is a romance book. I don't know why we're being walked step by step through a figure skating practice. This book is literally 90% figure skating, 7% hockey, and 3% romance. I personally didn't think a single character was likable, and I also thought Zoe was incredibly inconsistent. Around the 300-page mark, Chase and Zoe literally go from hating each other to dating with one conversation. And it wasn't even a deep conversation because everything in this book is so flat. It's also randomly mentioned one time towards the beginning of this book that Chase was abused by his dad when he was a kid. And then that's literally never touched on again until the last like 10 pages of this book, where Chase says to Zoe, yeah, my dad used to hit me as a kid. And then Zoe goes, oh, I'm sorry. And then they completely drop it and move on. And again, it's never brought up again. Honestly, I found that incredibly distasteful. And I think if you're going to add something like that into a book, you need to do it with respect. And I just feel like that's not what happened in this book. Also, for some reason, this book has both first person and third person, and I do not have a preference actually, and I will read both first and third person. However, I think that was a very odd choice to have both. So if you're somebody who doesn't like first person or doesn't like third person, don't read this book, because guess what? They're both in here. And there's so much more that I could say that I didn't like about this book, but I'm gonna leave it at that. Again, 0.5 stars. This was literally one of my least favorite reads of the entire year. I would not recommend this to my worst enemy. And then I read Heart Check by Emily Charlotte, and I ended up giving it 4.5 stars, which I needed after the crap I read before it. This book was super cute, and I didn't realize that it was a high school hockey romance. I very lightly skimmed the back of the book before I chose to get the book, and then I decided to read it afterwards because I was like, you know what? This doesn't look like a high school romance to me, so I decided to read it, and it does actually say that they are in high school on the back. So that one is on me. It was really cute, and I'm pretty sure it's gonna be series, and if it is, I definitely will be continuing it. The beginning was just a little bit slow and a little bit repetitive, but other than that, I really enjoyed this book. Again, 4.5 stars. It was really cute, and I definitely would recommend it. And then I finally started the Windy City series, and I read Mile High, and I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. It is really long, and there were definitely scenes and chapters that didn't drive the story along that could have been cut out. That being said, I really liked them in there and the addition of them, but for that reason, I can see why some people don't really like the first book. Xander's and Stevie were so cute together, and I love the snippets that we give them in the other books as well. Spoiler alert, this isn't the only Windy City book I read this month. Normally, I don't like when we talk about the FMC's body so much, but because it's such a central part of Stevie's character, I didn't really mind it, but I can see why other people would. Again, I loved it and I gave it 5 stars. I definitely would recommend it. And then I read the second book, The Right Move, and I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars. I still absolutely loved this book, and Ryan and Indy were so cute together. However, I didn't really like how at the beginning, it's pretty much all about Indy's past relationship trauma because she was just cheated on after being with this guy for what, 6 years and knowing him for 22 years. But then we learn about Ryan's past relationship trauma, and then Indy's is kind of like not important anymore. And I didn't really like that. And that's not me saying Ryan didn't think it was important. I don't think he ever felt that way. I just didn't really like how Indy's was pretty much ignored because they both had reasons to be insecure about a next relationship. However, Indy's was just like completely dropped from the story. And I feel like something else that backs that up is that her final conversation with Alex is from Ryan's point of view, and we never really get the full picture of what they spoke about. So I just didn't really like how that was handled within the book. But again, I don't think Ryan thought her past relationship trauma was insignificant. I just felt like the story itself felt that way, if that makes any sense. But like I said, I did think they were really cute, and I still really loved it, and I gave it 4.5 stars, and I still would recommend it. And then I read the third book, Caught Up, and this was easily my favorite in the series so far. I loved it so much. Another 5-star read. I feel like single parent books are so easy to get wrong just because the non-parent's relationship with the child is just as important, if not more important, than the relationship with the parent. I definitely think this is one that handled it very well. Miller not only loved Kai, but she also loved Max, if not more than she loved Kai. I love this book so much, but I do need Brian to get beat up. I needed a scene with either Kai or Monty confronting Brian for what he said to Miller. I'm holding out hope there's a scene like that in Play Along because that's Kai's brother's book. And if it's not there, I need it to be in Monty's book that comes out this year. And if it's not there, Liz Tomforde, please write a bonus scene just for me of Brian getting beat up. But again, I gave this one 5 stars, and I highly recommend this series. And then I read Hot for Slayer by Allie Hazelwood, and again, I gave this one 4 stars. This one was very short, and I really just feel like it would have been so much better as a full-length novel. I actually listened to this one as well because when I downloaded it from KU, it also was like, hey, you can just listen to the audiobook. So I was like, okay, even though I don't have Audible, so I don't know how I was able to do that, but I was. And the audiobook is literally less than 3 hours, so I put that baby in 2x speed and listened to it on my first flight home. I do think I would have liked it better if I actually read it because just like with Bound, I didn't really like the male narrator. If you've seen Hotel Transylvania, picture Adam Sandler as Dracula and take that accent times like 50, and that is how the male narrator sounded in this book. Because of how short this book was, I do think the story was pretty rushed. But I really liked the concept, and I really did like the characters other than the male narrator. So even though it was rushed, I did still give it 4 stars because I did overall really enjoy it. And then I read Drop Shot by Vi Denton, and I gave this one 4.5 stars. I thought this one was really cute, and can we take a second for the cover? I love this cover so much. I think it is so pretty. Whoever the cover artist is, you ate. I will be honest, my tennis knowledge comes from Wii Tennis, so it's not that great. And there were a couple times where the tennis terminology wasn't really explained, so there were some times that I was confused, and I easily could have looked it up. I just chose not to for some reason. It was kind of a slow start, but once things start picking up, they really pick up, and it's super engaging from there on out. I haven't heard anyone talking about this book, and truthfully, that is a problem. It was really cute. Again, 4.5 stars, and I definitely would recommend it. And for my final read for the year, book 100, I read Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry, and I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. Truthfully, it was incredibly boring, and I do think the last like 30% of the book definitely saved it. I've seen a lot of people say if you think Happy Place was her best book, you won't really like Great Big Beautiful Life, and if you liked Great Big Beautiful Life, you didn't really like Happy Place, and after reading this and having read Happy Place, I definitely agree with that. The tone of this book versus Happy Place is drastically different. I just found all of the Margaret parts very, very boring. Again, in that last 30%, they definitely did pick up, but it was just too slow at the beginning for me. I did really like Allison Hayden, and as always with Emily Henry's books, her characters are very, very well written, but there was just way too much of that flashbacks into Margaret's life that I just didn't really enjoy it. Again, I ended up giving it 3.5 stars, and I definitely agree with that assessment of if you think Happy Place was her best book, you probably won't really like this one, but if you think Happy Place was her worst book, you probably would like this one more. And those are the 22 books that I read in the month of December. I don't know if I will ever read 22 books in a month again, but we will see. I read 100 books this year, and that was great. But I love reading so much, and I don't want to feel obligated to read, and I don't want it to feel like it's a chore. And when I set a goal, I want to meet that goal. So even though I read 100 books this year, I am going to make my reading goal for 2026 50 books. Hopefully I read that many books, and hopefully I read more than 100 books, because that'd be awesome. I just don't want reading to feel like it's something that I have to do. I want it to remain something that I just love doing, and I don't think I could do that if I kept being like, oh, you have to read, you have to read, you have to read. I want it to be something, oh, I want to read. So I am setting my goal at 50. And as for my physical TBR, again, it currently is at 48 books. That being said, Black Friday hit this year and I added 20 books to my physical TBR. And Black Friday is at the end of the year, so now I'm concerned about next Black Friday if I will go just as crazy or more crazy and get 20 plus books again. And I want to make it a realistic goal that I really think I could meet. So I think I'm going to make my physical TBR goal 40. I know. Faith, that's only 8 books. Okay, yes. I guarantee you, I will buy so many books throughout the year. Hopefully I get it way below 40, but in case I get 20 plus books at Black Friday again, I don't want to be scrambling at the last minute to get it below a certain number. So I think 40 is a safe choice. So those are my reading goals for 2026. Next week, I'm going to release another episode in my series where I compare books to their film or TV show adaptation, and I'm going to do People We Meet on Vacation. For that series, I've been trying to get a video out the last Sunday of each month. However, I do think I'm going to kind of change that up a bit. I think what I'm going to do is do big movie releases. So for example, People We Meet on Vacation. I'm probably going to try to do Project Hail Mary and definitely Sunrise on the Reaping later this year. And there are more adaptations coming out this year, but those are the ones I'm thinking of off the top of my head. And then I think I might add past adaptations in just here and there and not make an obligation to do it the last Sunday of each month. As of right now, that's what I think I'm gonna do, but we will see. And with that, I think that is all that I have for you guys today. Be sure to like and subscribe and follow my Instagram and my TikTok, which are linked in the description below for more bookish content. I hope you all read some great books in December. I hope you had a Merry Christmas, and I hope you had a fantastic reading year in 2025 and have an even better one in 2026. Love you guys. Bye.